Ladies and gentlemen, we are standing on the edge of a geopolitical shift that most mainstream media is completely missing right now. While everyone is focused on the noise of the protests in Tehran, a quiet but thunderous message was just sent from Beijing to the rest of the world. The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi just used a phrase that should send chills down the spine of every strategic planner in Washington, D.C. He warned against the law of the jungle. Now, on the surface, this sounds like standard diplomatic rhetoric, but if you look at the timing, the location, and the stakes involved, this is actually a veiled threat. It is a signal that the rules of the game in the Middle East have officially changed. There is a specific hidden implication in this statement regarding the Strait of Hormuz and global oil prices that could trigger an economic shockwave in the United States within weeks, and I'm going to explain exactly what that mechanism is and why China might be the one to pull the trigger later in this video. You need to understand this because it affects the gas pump in Ohio just as much as it affects the palaces in Tehran. Welcome to the deep dive. Let's decode the chaos. To understand why China is stepping in now, we have to look at the immediate situation. It is January 2026. Iran is currently facing one of its most severe waves of anti-government protests in years. We are seeing reports of internet blackouts, severe crackdowns, and a regime that looks increasingly cornered. In the past, this would be the moment where the United States or European powers would be the loudest voices in the room, talking about sanctions, human rights, or even regime change. But yesterday, the phone rang in Tehran, and it wasn't Washington on the line. It was Beijing. According to the latest reports from the South China Morning Post, Wang Yi held a high-stakes call with his Iranian counterpart Abbas Araghchi. The Chinese message was explicitly clear. China stated it opposes any external forces interfering in Iran's internal affairs and warned against the law of the jungle. Now, let's pause and analyze that specific phrase, law of the jungle. In the world of diplomacy, words are weapons. When China uses this term, they are directly attacking the Western-led international order. They are implying that the United States and its allies do not follow international law, but rather they use brute force, sanctions, and covert operations to topple governments they dislike. By using this phrase, China is positioning itself not just as a trading partner to Iran, but as a moral guardian and a security guarantor. This is a massive pivot. For decades, China's policy was non-interference. They wanted the oil, they wanted the trade, but they didn't want the headache of Middle Eastern politics. That era is over. China is no longer just buying oil. They are buying stability. They brokered the peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran previously, and now they are actively trying to firewall the Iranian regime against collapse. Why? Why does China care if the streets of Tehran are burning? This brings us to the first major pillar of our analysis, the Belt and Road Initiative and energy security. For the American audience, you have to realize that China imports a massive amount of its energy. Iran is a critical node in their supply chain. If the Iranian government falls, or if the country descends into a chaotic civil war like Syria or Libya, China's energy security is directly threatened. But it's deeper than that. Iran is crucial to China's vision of a Eurasian landmass connected by trade, bypassing American naval power. If a pro-Western government were somehow to emerge from these protests, a scenario that Washington hawks dream of, it would sever a critical arm of Chinese influence. It would essentially surround Chinese allies in the region. So when Wang Yi speaks about the law of the jungle, he is saying that China will not tolerate a regime change operation that threatens its national interests. Now, let's look at this from the American perspective. Why is this specific warning dangerous for U.S. interests in 2026? The United States has been trying to pivot to the Pacific to counter China, but the Middle East keeps pulling America back. If China effectively creates a protective umbrella over Iran, it neutralizes one of the biggest leverage points the U.S. has, sanctions. China has been buying Iranian oil despite sanctions for years. Now, by politically backing the regime during these protests, they are signaling that they will also provide the political capital to keep the economy afloat. This makes U.S. sanctions less effective. It undermines the power of the U.S. Treasury. Furthermore, we have to talk about the Axis of Upheaval, or the emerging anti-Western alliance. We are seeing closer coordination between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. By defending Iran, China is solidifying this bloc. They are telling the world that if you join the Chinese sphere of influence, you get protection. You get a superpower that will stand up for you against the Western jungle. This is a powerful marketing pitch to other autocratic nations or developing countries that are skeptical of U.S. foreign policy. But there is a darker, more volatile aspect to this that I hinted at in the beginning. Let's go back to that law of the jungle comment and what it means for the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is the world's most important oil choke point. About 20 to 30% of the world's oil flows through there. Historically, the U.S. Navy has been the guarantor of free navigation there. But as tensions rise and as Iran feels more pressure from these internal protests, the regime might look for an external crisis to distract its population. This is a classic dictator's playbook. If you have trouble at home, start a fight abroad. Here is the connection. If Iran feels emboldened by China's support, if they feel that China has their back, they might be more willing to take aggressive actions in the Persian Gulf. They might harass shipping, seize tankers, or threaten to close the strait, blaming Western interference or Zionist agitation. Usually, the fear of U.S. retaliation keeps Iran in check, but if China is warning against the law of the jungle, they are essentially telling the U.S., if you strike Iran, you are answering to us. This raises the threshold for conflict. It creates a situation where a small skirmish could escalate into a major superpower standoff. And this is where the economic impact hits home. If the markets sense that the U.S. cannot guarantee the safety of oil transit because China is diplomatically blocking them, the risk premium on oil goes through the roof. We could see oil jump to $100 or $120 a barrel overnight. For the average American, this means inflation spikes again. It means the cost of goods transport rises. It complicates the Federal Reserve's job. It's not just about foreign policy, it's about your wallet. Now, I promised I would tell you about the specific implication that keeps analysts awake at night. It's about the technology transfer. We know that Iran supplies drones to Russia. We know they support proxies across the region. If China decides that the survival of the Iranian regime is a core interest, similar to how they view North Korea, we might see an acceleration of Chinese surveillance technology flowing into Tehran. We are already seeing reports of the Great Firewall technology being adapted for Iran. The internet blackouts we are seeing today in Tehran, that's not just flipping a switch, that requires sophisticated network control. If China exports its state-of-the-art surveillance and censorship AI to Iran, the ability of the Iranian people to organize, to protest, or to seek freedom is crushed not by bullets, but by algorithms. This is the law of the jungle in reverse. China claims to be fighting against chaos, but they are exporting the tools of total control. They are helping an unpopular regime survive against the will of its people, all under the guise of stability. From the lens of Washington, this is a disaster. It means that the dream of a democratic, free Iran is being suffocated by Chinese tech and diplomatic cover. It means that the Middle East is moving from a unipolar American moment to a bipolar Cold War reality. So what should the United States do? This is the million-dollar question. If the U.S. pushes too hard in support of the protesters in Iran, China uses it as proof of Western interference and doubles down on support for the regime. If the U.S. does nothing, the protesters are crushed and China cements its role as the new power broker of the Middle East. It's a trap, a diplomatic trap set by Beijing. We also have to consider the role of Israel and Saudi Arabia here. Both are watching this terrified. They see the U.S. distracted with domestic politics and the Pacific theater. They see China moving in. If they conclude that America is no longer the reliable sheriff in town, they might start making their own deals with Beijing. We already saw the Saudis do it. This trend could accelerate, leaving the U.S. isolated in a region it dominated for 50 years. To wrap this up, the warning from China regarding the law of the jungle is not just a throwaway line, it's a declaration of intent. China is telling the world that it is now a stakeholder in Iranian domestic security. They are drawing a line in the sand. They are betting that the United States, weary from decades of war and focused on domestic issues, will not have the stunnage to challenge them. They are betting that they can rewrite the rules of the Middle East without firing a shot, simply by guaranteeing the survival of regimes that oppose America. This is the new great game game, and right now it looks like China is making the moves while the West is just reacting. I want to know what you think. Do you believe the US should actively support the protesters in Iran even if it risks a conflict with China? Or should America step back and focus on its own problems? Let me know in the comments below. This story is developing rapidly, and the implications for the global economy are massive. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, because as soon as the next update drops, we are going to break it down. Thanks for watching.